Welcome, everyone. My name is James Palsick, and I am your facilitator tonight. This is part of the ongoing Science Safety webinar series, and tonight's topic is most common sources of accidents found in science, STEM, and CTE laboratories, as well as some prevention strategies. Tonight, we're going to explore some common sources of accidents and injuries in science, STEM, and CTE, and look at some of those strategies that can help reduce the hazards and risks for your staff and students. Collaboratively, we can work to increase safety awareness and help you stay safer with your students. And I know that's one of your key words, Dr. Roy, is safer. The R is critically important in there. And it is right now, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Kenneth Roy, America's most trusted science, STEM, and CTE safety education authority, to the conversation. Now, Dr. Roy began his career in secondary education as a chemistry, physics, and a math teacher. He eventually served as a science and math department chair and a K-12 administrative director of science. Currently, Dr. Roy is the Director of Environmental Health and Safety, the Chemical Hygiene Officer, the Designated Asbestos Compliance Officer, the PCB Program Coordinator, the Silica Compliance Coordinator, all at Glastonbury Public Schools in Connecticut, in addition to being the Chief Science Safety Compliance Advisor and Chief Safety Blogger for the National Science Teaching Association, or NSTA, that we're all familiar with, as well as the Safety Compliance Officer for the NSELA Group, which is the National Science Education Leadership Association. And I believe you're the author of 13 science and STEM laboratory safety books or resources, and well over 800 safety articles found in professional journals, associations, blogs, found all over the globe. Now, Dr. Roy also recently served as the co-researcher for a Penn State University paper, a study rather, which was a national study examining factors associated with STEM and CTE education, looking specifically at laboratory accidents across the United States. That is a fascinating snapshot of what's happening in our schools today, and I'm sure we're going to discuss some of your key findings tonight to help illustrate those safety perceptions and look at some of those common sources of hazards in our STEM labs. And yes, that voice you hear, if you recognize it, it is me. I am back. I'm here assisting Science Safety and Dr. Ken Roy. I was the former Director of Education, Safety, and Compliance for Flynn Scientific. I've authored multiple books for the Council of State Science Supervisors, multiple chemical hygiene plans, and I'm the safety reviewer for the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. In addition to all of that, I've appeared on over 100 podcasts, and I've only written about 100 articles on science education, safety, and better professional practices, of course. Many are located on edcircuit.com, but I'm catching up to Dr. Ken. I hope I can catch him with that. Now, with all that said, everyone, Dr. Ken, I'm giving you the control here, and I'd love for you to continue the dialogue and help us really understand the risks and the common sources of injuries and accidents in our STEM labs. Dr. Roy, it's all yours.
Thank you, JP. Appreciate it. And just want to welcome everyone and appreciate the fact you're taking your evening to spend some time with us. And hopefully it will be fruitful for you, which I'm sure it will be. These are interesting times, most certainly. And unfortunately, sometimes safety is not where it needs to be. And this is one of the reasons that we've been so much involved in promoting these types of webinars to help teachers and administrators have an understanding of how risky things are, how hazardous they are, and how to protect yourself and your kids. In other words, you need to have a safer, just remember, as JP stated, you can't always make it safe. You can do all of these protocols. Accidents can still happen. But what you can do certainly is make it safer. And one other thing that I always do is I do expert witness work, and usually it's parents whose kids have been hurt in K-12 science, STEM labs, whatever. You always want to make sure, as you know, and I always end it saying, and you think you're sending your kid to a safer place. No, you're not. All right. And it's really important that you listen up and hear this. And again, tonight, it's not to scare you. It's not to have you leave this and resign. It's basically to raise your level of awareness. That's the important piece here. So please keep it from that perspective. Okay, understanding there are risks, right? Now, a lot of times the science teacher or the STEM teacher or the STEAM teacher, whatever, knows their risks. And the administrator, not so much, all right? And that's because they probably never, in most cases, never taught the subject, and they weren't in the trenches, and you need to enlighten them. Because if something happens, you're both going to be involved, all right? So that's really important. All right, so to increase student engagement and support learning, there is an emphasis on hands-on learning in science, STEM, CTE, Fab Labs, makerspaces, et cetera, et cetera. But this emphasis, and notice the bold, increases potential safety hazards and resulting risks. Remember, if there are hazards, as a result of those hazards, you're going to have risks, right? And it's not just for the students, remember, it's also for staff members or any other occupant in that place, that the site that this activity is taking place. So what kind of hazards are we talking about? Basically, there are three kinds of hazards that you find in these places called labs, right? There are physical hazards, there are chemical hazards, and there are biological hazards. And I can go into any laboratory and more than likely, I'm going to find all three. My point is, just because it's a biology lab doesn't mean you're not going to find chemical or physical hazards. You most certainly can. And the same is true of all these other science disciplines. Things can go wrong in the laboratory. However, these situations are mostly preventable. Absolutely. All right. In other words, as long as you've taken the proper precautions and making it safer, your chances of the risks are dramatically reduced, all right? Under legal safety standards, all right? Legal safety standards, well, what are we talking about? Legal safety standards, we're talking about OSHA, for example. We're talking about the EPA, the NFPA, the fire people, et cetera, et cetera. And you might have state certain types of safety issues that they deal with, the labor departments, the education departments, et cetera. So those are legal, right? Legal safety standards. And then there are another group of things that you need to look at, better professional safety practices. And those are some of the organizations like the NSTA and CELA, ITEEA, the American Chemical Society, et cetera, et cetera. Now, very interesting, about 10, 15 years ago, the courts all of a sudden said, you know, we should not just be looking at legal safety standards, because what they always used to do is, okay, well, so much for the better professional safety practices. The most important thing are the legal safety standards. Now in the courts, they're equal. So for example, if I live in California, all right, I'm required to have lips on the shelving for chemicals and earthquake, well, that helps, unless it's really bad up there in the number, keep things on the shelf so they don't fall off, et cetera, et cetera. That's a legal safety standard. I'm on the other side of the country in Connecticut. We have very minor earthquakes, all right? However, the NSTA, National Science Teaching Zone, says you better have lips on the shelving in order to hold those chemicals in. Now that's better professional safety practice. So here in Connecticut, you can be cited if you don't have those lips, even though it's not a legal standard, right? But it's a better professional safety practice. I just want to make sure you guys are clear on that, right? Teachers have a duty or standard of care. Okay, that's the legal lingo, right? That's your responsibility. You're the parent, in other words, and they're your kids, right? To protect the students from all reasonable, foreseeable risks of injury or harm. Now look, reasonable, right? Reasonable. Now let's take, for example, you're doing something, you're using hazardous chemicals, maybe you're using acids. Well, what, gee, yeah, you can burn eyes, and the risk, well, you can go blind, right? That's reasonable, that's foreseeable. But there could be the potential for something else that, oh, geez, I never was trained on, I never knew about it. And, this just came out of nowhere. You're not engineers. You don't know necessarily internal operations of things. And so be it. When determining legal liability, duty, or standard of care, what would you, a careful and prudent parent would do in this situation? That's what I'm saying. You're like the parent, right? Biologically or not, but legally you are, with kids in your class or anybody else in there, any occupants, right? Is often used. In simple terms, was the educator negligent or worse, reckless in that instance? Over the past 20+ years, schools have not done a good job protecting their students and teachers, thus reducing their liability.
Did you actually say that was for the past 120 years?
Yeah, right.
Probably.
Well, more the emphasis has been the last 20 years because of lawsuits.
Yes.
Things that, and you've got media, you've got social things going on here. You've got, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So the level of awareness over the last 20 years has been raised dramatically, right? Again, comes down to communication. Who knows what, and the sharing of it. So this is why, in fact, it makes things look worse. And you're probably right, all along those things have been there, but nobody knew about it. So what does data tell us? Data analysis from a study completed, oh, wait a minute, I think I'm familiar with this. 2020,
I hope so.
investigating safety in STEM and CTE labs. Key findings. That we had almost 1,000 respondents in this study, myself and Dr. Tyler Love from Penn State. And it was nationwide, and it was really interesting. And when the results came in, it was really scary. I think things, from our perception, were worse than we ever anticipated. Now, there's just a few of the findings, of which there are many, right? 80% of science and STEM teachers reported having one injury in the past year. Excuse me, 80% had at least one injury in just the last year? Think how many school districts there are, how many schools there are, how many high schools there are, how many middle schools there are. This is unbelievable. And these are the only ones kind of reported. I mean, there's no national database, formal national database required. So a lot of this is anecdotal. But in this study, that's a scary result. Or that's quite a hard statistic. 35% of the teachers of STEM and CTE did not have any formalized safety training. Well, listen, I feel real good about that. Might.
That is so frightening.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely frightening. When you think of the hazards, the number of hazards and the resulting risk, and the level of those hazards and the risks in laboratories, that's scary. That's it's an unsafe place. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's an unsafe place. All right. Completing formalized safety training can reduce accident. Now, this was a key finding, right? If you have formalized safety training, which, oh, gee, by the way, that's required under the HAZCOM standard and the laboratory standard with OSHA, right? Completing formalized safety training reduces accidents by 51%. Now we're talking a decent statistic. Not the best, but absolute improvement, right? So again, very interesting information. What the data tells us, key findings again, 77% of the accidents involve students. Wow, gee, at least the teacher, oh, wait a minute, that means, 23%, almost a quarter of the accidents involve the other occupants like teachers, paras, special ed teachers. Yeah, not good. Shouldn't involve nobody. 62% of the teachers regard students not following instructions. 62% of them regard students not following instructions as the leading cause of accidents or injuries. Well, isn't that special? Again, totally avoidable. Do your due diligence, do your job before they lift up a test tube or they light a burner, whatever they're doing, the hands-on, which is important in science and STEM, as you know, right? They need to have training, safety training first. 69% of the teachers do not use a safety contract or acknowledgement form with their students. Well, isn't that special? Now, something that you do learn if you've ever been sued is, boy, that contract or acknowledgement form would have helped protect me because the kids and the parents are acknowledging the fact that there are hazards and there are risks, and my kid needs to be following the safety protocols. Wow. Never thought about that. In this way, teachers are exposing themselves to potential legal issues should an accident occur in the lab.
That's such a preventable hazard, isn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's so simple to do and put in place. And it's required and it's seldom done. That's amazing.
STEM accidents increase one class size exceeds 24. All right. 57% of schools have classes larger. 57%. All right. We're almost talking 60% of schools have classes larger than 25 students, but only 26% of those schools have a facility large enough to support them. Point is, they're overcrowded. They have surpassed the occupancy load. Oh, what is that? The principal says. What is this occupancy load? It's amazing how they know what the occupancy load is when it comes to their auditorium or their pool or their cafeteria, but they don't know that for their laboratories? Seriously, give me a break, right? 57%, not good, not good, right? And under the NFPA, the fire code, NFPA 101, the occupancy load for science laboratories, remember this, 50 square feet net per occupant. I'm not talking class size. We're talking the number of occupants. I might have 3 special ed teachers in there. I have the classroom teacher, the lab teacher, whatever. So it's more than that, but it's net. What does that mean? Well, you take the perimeter, you get the area, all right? And then you subtract out desks, countertops, carts, whatever. What you have after that, you divide by 50. And that tells you how many bodies legally supposed to be in that laboratory. By the way, notice I said legally. This is not a wish list. Oh, it should be. It must be. And if any teacher knows that they are over the occupancy load and they go ahead and they do the labs as usual and something happens, guess who's it legally? Oh, gee, yes. Number one is that certified professional. The teacher is it, though there's shared liability with the administration. But this is why it's so important. Always put these concerns in writing, because that's the only thing administrators understand, because then there's a paper trail. And they know that can be followed and lead right to their back door or front door. 51% of the schools nationally have had an injury or litigation. Wow. Half of our schools. Again, notice you can download the report right there at the bottom of the page.
Yes, that is a great resource for everyone on this webinar to use. It's complimentary. There's no charge for it, and it is freely accessible for all of you. Okay, I know that there are potential hazards and resulting risks in my school or across my school district, the STEM and CTE programs. Now what? Help me understand specifically where to look for these risks to make my school safer, underlined. I love that Dr. Well, look at this image from the safety perspective. What is considered correct or incorrect in this image? Now, first of all,
before you need to determine what safety actions you need to take, you need to determine what potential hazards there are and what resulting risks there are. Then you can determine, do I need appropriate ventilation? Do I need personal protective equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously they are dealing with, looks like hazardous chemicals, they're dealing with glassware, they're in a laboratory, et cetera, right? Now, one of the first things that would hit my eye is the young lady who is in the middle of that picture, and her hair is hanging down on her shoulder. And you say, well, then what's the big deal about that? So, well, if one is using a Bunsen burner or even a hot plate, whatever, and she bends forward, now let's figure out the gravity effect. Yeah, it's going to go right into the flamer on the hot plate. And guess what? She is going to be a flame, period. And
Exactly.
I have seen this. I hate to even say it. I have seen this happen. It is scary, scary. You want to talk about panic, not only of the kid that's burning, but all the other kids and everybody else. So try to deal with that. Just not a good deal. Now, the somewhat good news is the fact that they have indirectly vented chemical splash goggles on. All right, that is key. I would also like to have seen the covered body torso, non-latex lab aprons, and also gloves, right? One of the first things they need to do to determine the hazards is check out the safety data sheet. And the teacher, of course, should have done this ahead of time. So he or she would know what types of personal protective equipment is needed in this. This has nothing to do with this picture specifically, but I'll never forget, I was doing in middle school, and it was a construction lab, AKA the old wood shops. And the kids were fine. They had appropriate PPE on, and everything was covered. They had shoes on, everything else. Teacher was sitting behind the desk. So I walk in and I was introduced as a safety compliance inspector. The teacher gets out from the desk, and all of a sudden I hear this flip flop, flip flop, flip flop coming over to me. And I look down, and the teacher has not shoes, has flip flops on. I'm sorry, in a construction lab, when you're dealing with all those tools, hand tools, power tools, wood, concrete blocks, who knows? Well, what do you think is going to happen if it was on that bare foot? Yeah, crushing. And of course, the interesting thing is, I said, teacher, why do you have on flip-flops? Silly me, I just asked. And the teacher said, oh, gee, my feet sweat. So, and it's just uncomfortable. So I just can't wear regular shoes. I said, you know what? That's TMI. That's too much information. You just need to get shoes, seriously. So I cited her for that. But, that's the mentality out there. The kids were good, not the teacher.
On this photo, Dr. Ken, I would also insist that all those chemicals have a GHS label on them, so you can identify what those substances are.
Unless they're unknowns.
Okay, if they're doing a precipitate or a titration lab.
There you go. I made an assumption, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll let you do the next one. I won't say anything.
Thanks. You're the best. Anyways, look at this image of safety perspective. Let's consider it correct or incorrect. All right, now we're talking. Look at this, lab coats. Woo! So professional. No gloves. And to me, the worst violation, look what's over their eyes. Safety glasses, useless. Let me repeat myself. Useless when it comes to a splash. Well, why are they useless, right? You look at safety glasses on the sides, even if they have side shields, it's still open, all right? Same thing up here on the top. Well, don't you think, and I have research that shows, in fact, if they get splashed, it does get into the eye and can blind you. So this is a big no-no, and I couldn't tell you. I mean, I've gone as far as even the American Chemical Society once or twice in the past years and other professional organizations. right on the cover of their journals, I'll see something like this. And I'll talk to the editor. I'll call the editor. They love hearing from me. I'll talk to the editor and say, you know what? I said, I have to mention this, all right, for your own legal defense. I said, you need to be very careful, because the problem is, if somebody repeats what you're showing and they get hurt, you have shared liability. And publishers realized this in the 90s, back in the 90s, not before then, but in the 90s, because their parents' lawyers figured out the school districts aren't the one that have the money when we're going to sue. It's the publisher. That's where the big bucks are. And they started going after the publishers legally like you can't believe. Well, all of a sudden, you look at a book, a science lab manual from the 80s, and you look science lab manual in the late 90s and into the 2000s, huge difference. It's like almost every page mentions, oh, gee, safety. But that's why, because so many of them got sued. And that's just a little history, but it'll go to show you. But you see, again, in this particular situation, the other thing, space, all right? Everybody has a safety zone. Not in this lab. Your buddies just crowd around you. I mean, that way, you can, whatever, all right? Another one of my expert witnesses, all right, was a middle school. Female going to run a miter saw, and there was on the floor was the tape, the safety zone. Only the operator was supposed to be in there. Two boyfriends of the young lady crowded right in there, right next to her. The teacher, the other end of the lab, back to the student. Okay, she starts the miter saw, her hands on it, kicks back. Well, gee, guess what? She doesn't have one of these anymore, right? Chop, chop, it went, right? Teacher is it, big time, all right? First of all, why do you have a miter saw in grade 6 in a tech ed engineering? Seriously? No, I don't think so. Totally inappropriate. And number 2, you need to be visually inspecting, watching, supervising when they're doing these kinds of things with power tools. Okay. Student laboratory injuries compared to teacher injuries are considered as more severe typically because they should have been predicted and potentially prevented by the educator under the duty or standard of care liability-wise. Know how to identify potential hazards and risks. That is your job under duty or standard of care. And to translate that so the people working under you, the kids, understand and behaviors are following through with this. And again, under duty or standard of care.
Right. And I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it.
Of course.
In a STEM lab, everyone should be aware that there are inherent risks with the equipment, apparatus, the materials, just the entire architecture and setup of that room, that facility, and all of those things in it. And it just seems to be that it's not as prevalent as it used to be. It's just not as powerful as it used to be. So I am so looking forward to what's coming next here, Dr. Ken, because you shared some of this with me and I can't wait to, I'm going to do it now.
You're sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Here we go.
Okay. What grade level do most lab accidents occur?
Great question.
Yes, it is. At the elementary, middle, or high school level here in the States. Why do you believe this to be true?
I think we should ask our audience to put their answers in the chat. Let's see how well we do.
Are there contributing factors that make one grade level more prone to accidents than others?
It's both very good questions. What grade level do most accidents occur in the lab? Are there contributing factors that make one grade level more prone to accidents than others? Well, let's see what's in the chat box. Grade 6, grade 11, high school, elementary due to lack of training. Oh, I like that answer. Let's see if we can get one more in here. Elementary grades due to lack of training teachers in science. Interesting. Well, Dr. Ken, I think we're ready for your reveal. What grade level lab accidents occur? Well, let's see what you've got for us here. Wow.
My God, look at this. 70%. Can you, 7 out of 10 accidents occur in grade 9.
Wow.
Out of 10. I mean, what is going on here? Right? As it states here, this is a preventable statistic with safety training, modeling of expected techniques, accepted behaviors, reviewing instructions prior to the lab, etc. Part of the problem, and there are a number of factors here that make this realistic and understandable, right? First of all, the students going from grade 8, now remember in grade 8, they're at the top of the pecking order. Grade 9, they just fell down to the bottom, right? Because now you have sophomores, juniors, and seniors, right? So they a little nervous about things, not necessarily in tune with things. The types of activities, much more sciencey, if I can just kind of use that word, in grade 9 science. I mean, some of these kids are going right into biology. They're going right into chemistry. I've even seen a few places where they're going into physics and a number of other areas. We're raising it up a few notches, all right, as compared to general science, maybe earth space science that was in grade 7 or 8 or whatever, life science. It's not the heavy stuff, let's put it that way, that you come into in high school. A lot of times, first time they've been in a formal lab. There are still school districts that do not have formal labs at the middle school level, believe it or not. They're in a general classroom, and which makes me real nervous by some of the activities that are going on there. Right?
And Ken, I have to share something with you. One of our esteemed guests just made a comment that teachers are now treating them like high school students, but don't know much about their previous lab skills if they've changed buildings. That's got to be a huge contributing factor.
Well, that's again what I'm saying. You're raising it up notches, and the expectations for safety and the potential hazards and risks are much greater because of the kind of hands-on activities, kinds of equipment they're using, the kinds of chemicals they're using, the kinds of biologicals that they're dealing with. So, you know, it's all in there. So,
you know, and I'm going to speak to this from pre-service teacher perspective. Many newly hired or recent hired teachers in a high school are often given grade 9 and 10 science rather than a senior biology or a senior chemistry. Now knowing this statistic, I would think it should be absolutely essential for a grade 9 science teacher to have that annual safety training and really make sure that they're aware of all this, because in my mind, again, that is a preventable statistic. That should be a even distribution. It should not be 70% in one grade level and 30% sprinkled across the other 12 grades.
You know, I personally have experience with this because for years I taught mathematics, I taught physics, I taught chemistry, and my experience primarily was with juniors and seniors who had umpteen years of safety training, had those first 2 years in high school with it, especially, et cetera, right? So you kind of get spoiled. Then a few years here and there sprinkled, I had to have a 9th grade general science. It was a rude awakening because what I was used to seeing and what I saw there frightened the crap out of me. I mean, sometimes I was scared for my own life of some of the stuff that I saw going on in there. I mean, it was just wild. And that's another one of the reasons that I got into safety was just because of my own experience in those particular situations. So, I mean, I can see, again, that 70%, I still wouldn't think it'd be that high, but I can see that that can be a reality and why it can be a reality. And it's funny, it's very interesting that you bring up about new teachers or even student teachers, for that
Mhm.
fact, the universities, not all, but most, and I'm only talking anecdotally, all right, because I've worked with a number of them. Their methods courses leave a lot to be desired when it comes to safety training. They are throwing these new teachers, these neophytes, to the wolves. I mean, when these teachers, new teachers come in the first year that they're teaching and they've had next to no safety, right? Safety training, forget it. And what do I hear from university professors, many of them, right? I did work with the EPA about 10, 15 years ago, and we tried to help change this, right? And what did we hear? Almost every one of them, every one of them. We don't have time in our curriculum to deal with safety. Excuse me.
Wow.
This is a quote. Almost invariably, we don't have time to do safety. I said, are you kidding me? I said, you're throwing these poor teachers to the wolves. What about the kids also? I mean, you're putting them all at risk, right? So one of the things that a number of the states now have done with new teachers is required them, in addition to OSHA requirements, but they have their own plans for training science teachers and tech ed teachers. You know, it's funny, when you have an OSHA, a formal OSHA inspection, guess what the three first areas that that inspector wants to take a look at? Science, tech ed, and art. Because those are the three areas that are the most hazardous, have the highest level of risks for employees, right? Now, obviously also for students, but OSHA really doesn't give a rat's ass, so to speak, about the kids. Not totally true, but they're concerned about employees.
Right.
But it's important because the problem is, all right, the employer is supposed to provide a safer work environment for the employee. That means the administrator has to provide a safer working environment for teachers. Well, if the kids are not following those rules that OSHA sets up, guess what? It is now unsafe for that employee. So this is why the kids also need to be learning the protocols and the like, and the administration needs to make sure that that is happening. And I don't mean by a drive-by supervision where they just look in the door, oh yeah, everything's cool, and move on. Not
Right.
good.
And I think that all teachers should model the change that they want to see.
Yep,
They're
absolutely.
insisting that students have their goggles on. That teacher must have their goggles on.
And not designer safety glasses.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Certified, indirectly vented goggles, correct?
ANSI ISEA Z87.1 D3 is what you want to get. Don't go to the dollar store, please. There's a reason you're, well, now it's $1.25, but there's a reason you're
Agreed.
paying $1.25. And if you go to Flynn or Carolina or any of these other distributors, while you're paying more beaucoup bucks, well, that's because there, if you get hit with a projectile, yours isn't going to shatter. The dollar store one will.
Correct. And if you get splashed with a chemical, they
Yep.
won't leak. They'll protect your eyes.
Yep.
Okay, here it is. Here's the big reveal. The most
right.
common sources of accidents, Dr. Ken, according to your recent study. I am fascinated by this.
Well, yes and no. Glue guns? Yeah. Equipment machinery? Absolutely. Power tools? Absolutely. Spills, splashes, talking chemicals? Absolutely. Projectiles? Yeah. It's, you know, it's amazing to me. I'll see kids in a physics class go out into the corridor. All right. They're studying wave motion. Oh, gee, teacher, let's have the kids use slinkies or springs. Sure.
Right.
Go ahead, kids, stretch out, you know, go 30 feet, one at each end. And okay, do the wave motion, sine waves, this, that, whatever. Oh, whoop, Junior, let go. And guess where that spring ended up? Oh, too bad the kid didn't have eye protection on. Hello?
Yeah, so simple and such a preventable hazard.
Yeah, again, totally preventable, totally preventable. Shooting rockets off in the soccer field. Anybody have eye protection on? I mean, seriously? Oh no, hey, these teachers used to work for NASA. They know what they're doing. Nah, I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure they didn't,
Yeah,
because
me too.
Missouri is a
Right,
lot stricter on safety, compliance, and adherence than education seems to be.
moving right
So
along.
now we know the most common sources of accidents.
Again, these are not the only sources.
Oh,
but the
oh no,
most
they
common.
are not. They are the
Yeah,
most
common
common.
types of lab injuries.
Yes.
All right. Cuts, lacerations. Very interested to remain nameless, the school district and the state, but there was a lawsuit. A 7th grade teacher was having students do a dissection. We're using scalpels, and the teacher gave them the specimen, said, okay, kids, go to it. Wait till you find out all the different parts inside. Actually, it was plants, not animals, that they were taking a look at. Wait till you hear about this, blah, blah, blah. That morning, three kids got severely cut. One almost bled to death by using the scalpel, all right, in the classes. No safety was given, nothing, no talk about safety. Well, parents sued in the court, 3-judge panel. And the head judge says to the teacher, so help me understand. These kids are working with a hazard, a sharp, like a knife, right? A scalpel, a knife. And there is certainly that hazard. There's risk of them getting cut, as you saw. Why didn't you, in fact, bring it to their attention? Why didn't you at least say, you know what, you're dealing with a sharp, you can get cut. Here's how you use the scalpel. Always move it away from you when you're cutting, et cetera, et cetera. Teacher's response, well, this is grade 7. You know, these kids have used these probably from grades 3 or 4 on. You know how many years they've heard all about this safety stuff? I didn't see any need for me to repeat it. That's a quote. That is an absolute quote. In fact, it's online in the internet. Well, there, you know what? That was a lynching. She just hung herself. Just absolutely.
Wow.
How can you even, and this, you know what? That's scary. That is scary. Oh, why bother? Because they had it every, oh no, kids don't forget over the summer. No. No, we never have to repeat anything. No, we don't have to worry about that stuff. No. Developmental state, remember, you ever have that in psychology? You know, developmentally where a kid is at and where you're at. Well, I'm beginning to wonder, maybe you never left that lower range. But anyways, moving right along. How do schools reduce risks? The duty to maintain a safer science and engineering instructional space is shared by teachers, administrators, school boards, parents. It's everyone. It's spectral. Everybody has a role. Everybody has a responsibility. All right. Teachers and administrators need to communicate frequently to ensure that the student safety remains a school priority, embrace legal safety standards, better professional safety practices related to science, STEM, and CTE programs, including specific safety training, evaluation of activities using a hazard analysis and a risk assessment, resource documents and inspections as a starting point in their risk management program. Okay. You know, I always tell teachers, and I've written a few pieces for National School Board Journal, except several others. You know what? Parents, you go to parents' night. Please go and find out, gee, does your science lab for your kid have an eye wash? Does it have a shower? Does it have appropriate ventilation? Not that you're all knowing, but these are things that you need to know and to be aware of to make sure your school district is following better professional safety practices and legal safety standards. You have a responsibility as a parent to do that. All right.
And Dr. Ken, we had a question about, is this how to make my school safer? Yes, this is pretty much the recipe right here. There's
absolutely.
This is it right here.
Yep.
You can do all of that. You are well on your way to a safer program.
And let me say one other thing here. All right. You may find that the teacher will pull you aside and say, you know, I am so well aware of that, but the administration will not listen. I've heard this. I've heard this from teachers. All right. Oh, don't worry, teacher. I know you don't have enough eye protect. I know you don't have enough safety goggles. Give them some glasses. That will be fine. You can't be sued. You're held harmless. False, false, false. And I know this firsthand from my expert witness work in the courts. All right. Judges don't want to hear how you're held harmless if a kid is blinded or their skin is melted off of their face, not burned, melted like candle wax. Right. They don't want to hear that. Right. So administrators don't know what they're talking about, and they need to be enlightened. I'm sure these are good men and women, but they need to be enlightened. Okay. Chem teacher goes down to the principal. You know, there's something not right in my chem lab. And the principal goes, well, what's the matter? Oh, you know, every time we do something where there are fumes or vapors and they smell, and it's terrible. It's like it doesn't go away. And I feel like I'm breathing it all day long. Well, my first response is, remember, teacher, the kids come and go. You stay. You stay. In about 15, 20 years, you'll have COPD, lung cancer, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And the principal's response was, oh, seriously, get back to your lab. Chem labs are supposed to smell. That was the response. That was, talk about ignorance. Talk about ignorance. That almost borders on stupidity, actually.
That sounds reckless, actually, from a legal.
Oh, most reckless. Most reckless. Okay.
All right. So here's what you were just talking about, that AAA hazard analysis.
Driving home safety, as I love to say, the AAA approach, driving home safety. Administrators have a duty of supervision, a duty of standard of care, duty of supervision for the activities performed in the STEM-CTE programs in their schools, all right, including science labs, tech ed, engineering labs, et cetera. Anytime there's hands-on types of activities. The AAA method requires teachers to perform a hazard analysis. Emphasis, before each lab demonstration, before, all right, as mandated by standard 45 of the NFPA, then conduct a risk assessment. A risk assessment, that's the second A, assessment, all right? The first one was analysis for the hazard. The second A is assessment for risk. And the best possible, the third A, safety action. Well, what does that mean? In other words, what kind of PPE do I need based on the hazard and resulting risk? Now, I have to also say, there may be no coverage that you can that's going to protect anybody. So you don't do it. You don't do it. Go to YouTube.
It's that simple, right? It's that simple.
Yeah,
if the risk exceeds the educational utility of that activity,
there you go.
Watch it on YouTube or do it, period, because it's just too risky, right? If that voice in your head says, should I really be doing this?
Right.
Answer is no. It's that simple.
And, well, the problem is a lot of science teachers love drama and they love kids getting excited. And the bigger the flame, the more excited the kids are going to get, no matter if you burn the school down or not. So anyways, in order to perform this three-step approach to understanding evaluating hazards, you must follow these steps sequentially.
Yes, and that's important. So here they are.
AAA. Okay, we already talked about this, but first of all, hazard analysis, physical, chemical, biological hazards outlined on the safety data sheet, the STS, in tandem with teacher experience. Now, if I'm a new teacher, I don't have that experience, so I want to talk to my colleagues. Safety notes from the lab activity, use of the chemical hygiene plan, which you are required to have under OSHA and the laboratory standard, and trusted safety authorities, right? That's how you do a hazard analysis. Now, if it's a chemical, that SDS is going to be very, very helpful. I mean, even Section 8 tells you what kind of personal protective equipment you're required to have. Am I going to need goggles? Am I going to take the glasses? What side shield? What am I going to need? Right? So that's how you start. Secondly, now, what's the resulting risks if I'm going to have potential hazards? Refer again to SDS sections 2, 5, 6, 8, 10, 11, that highlight information for safer handling, such as hazards, fire safety, accidental spill information, stability, toxicological information, et cetera, et cetera. Again, you have colleagues in there. Hopefully, the more experienced ones are into safety. Now, I hate to say this, but sometimes they're not. And I've actually had people dismissed and fired, tenured people, because they were clueless for safety and they didn't bother following the rules. And it was just putting too many people at risk. So see ya, you're gone. I don't care if you're tenured or not. Safety action, determine the appropriate action based on the types of potential hazards and resulting risk. Well, that makes sense. The top 3 actions to consider based on OSHA hazard prevention and control include engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE, right? So those are the 3 areas you might. Now, engineering controls, again, do I have a shower? Do I have eye wash? Do I have appropriate ventilation? Do I have emergency shutoffs? I mean, you name it. Those are all kinds of engineering controls. Administrative controls, certainly with the rules and regulations, safety protocols that you need to be following. And again, everybody here, I'm sure, knows what personal protective equipment is, at least the appropriate kind. Again, if you're going to have a splash of liquid or something, goggles, not glasses. Physical hazards, you can use one or the other, generally speaking. But those are the things. And there's a
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry.
on the bottom, there is a blog that I wrote that deals with the AAA. And there's the internet address on there. And I would urge you to take a look as part of your homework. Take a look and read that, and it'll be most helpful. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem at all. I was going to mention that as well, that all of this is referenced and attributed for everyone that's here. Now, looking at safety, you really need to look at it from a holistic 360-degree perspective. And there's multiple aspects to keep in mind for having that balance in order to manage those hazards. And some districts or jurisdictions now are calling that risk management programs. And that's critically important to understand. But just doing one little part of it, well, we have PPE. Okay, that's great, but that's not your entire safety program. There's so many different pieces of it. And again, it's a continuum of developing that culture of safety awareness across your department, but across the entire district, across the state, across the whole country, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I just add one little note?
Of course you can.
Don't assume, do not assume that your hazard risk manager knows all the ins and outs of safety in a laboratory. Right now, let me just tell you that we are a vanishing breed. It is getting harder and harder to find people that are knowledgeable in the risk management areas. And what they're doing is they are saying, okay, a business manager, you take care of risk. You probably know what you're doing. So, or they'll have the head of facilities and maintenance that probably has a little better understanding of it than the business manager. But even so, just make sure you know who you're dealing with. And if it's not addressing your problem, you need to either you or your union representative go to town fire marshal if it's a fire issue,
Right.
Go to OSHA if it's another type of employment type of issue where it's unsafe in your work site, et cetera, et cetera. Because the problem for you is legally, if you know that your things are not being addressed, even though you went to the risk manager, if something happens, you are going to be shared liability. You're going to be in that lawsuit. Why? Because the courts consider the teacher in that laboratory is the one who's all knowing about safety, not the administrator. Be aware of that. You're the one that is absolutely number one responsible for safety in that lab, not the principal, not the superintendent, not the Board of Education members. So you have a big responsibility. Okay, sorry.
Oh, not a problem at all. I welcome that. Now, one thing I will say is that this holistic overview of a risk management for STEAM is really, this is thousands and thousands of pages of legal regulatory compliance, all really simplified for us to understand. You'll see that it is a continuum, that it repeats every year. It's almost like a Mobius strip. And that one piece here and there, they all contribute to that overall holistic safety program. But having that administrator, educator, and student PD annually is critically important. You can't just have that done at the time of hire as a condition of employment and watch a 5-minute video and answer 2 questions and consider that to be adequate. That is inappropriate, and that is definitely not correct. Having that access to that chemical hygiene plan or an environmental hygiene plan, as certain states call that, or a science safety manual or a CTE manual, something that combines all of those resources. The use of those lab safety acknowledgement forms, some people call them a lab safety contract, but they're really lab safety acknowledgement forms. And that needs to be done on an annual basis. And I do know that states require you to keep those until that student turns 18 or 21. So as a better professional practice, keep those, archive them until that student turns 21. Is that correct, Dr. Roy?
There are exceptions to that. There are some states where there's only a 3-year span. In other words, if I am in 9th grade and it happens, I have 3 years and then that's it. Hello?
And I'm back.
What happened?
I I do not know what exactly happened. Dr. Collins, will you give me share privilege again?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Collins. And we're back. I don't know what happened there, everyone. However, we are back. Again, performing that hazard analysis, risk assessment by educators prior to each activity being performed, so critically important. And also sharing really what your plans are and activities with the department chair and also with your administrator at the school so that there is a record of what's happening is also very important. As Dr. Ken's highlighted, having that appropriate PPE for every person in the lab is so essential. And that means appropriate, meaning that it fits properly, that it is the certified appropriate type of PPE. Sharing your current chemical inventory and safety data sheet listing. You need to have that in case of an emergency situation. I can't tell you how many schools have a very simplified version of their current chemical inventory, and I would doubt its accuracy. Performing those annual safety physical inspections across your science department, your STEM or STEAM rooms, your CTE facilities, that must be done. It must be documented. It must be available for an OSHA inspector, and it must be filed as well. And any deficiencies need to be dealt with. And as well as part of responsible chemical management, having those chemicals stored in safety cabinets in a secured facility under lock and key, that is very, very important. And again, this recycles, this repeats every single year. And that is why a holistic approach is really what is needed. And I just love this infographic that's here. Now, the team at Science Safety can really help you reduce your risk. They provide safety program reviews. They can review your chemical hygiene plans, your safety documents, your HAZCOM training, all of that stuff. They have customized learning available for all of the educators. It's accessible 24/7. There's personalized modules that are grade and discipline specific for all areas of science, STEM, and CTE. There's elementary, middle school, high school versions. There's AP versions. There's annual teacher compliance testing available. It's really remarkable what they have, and I encourage you to take a look at it and really appreciate all of that. Safety training documentation. Well, we know that having safety training and the verifiable certificates of completion that accompany the micro credentials that go with science safety training, we know that can reduce accidents in schools by 51%. Why not just enroll in that? That's something that just makes a whole lot of sense. Now, free CHO training. Every district, you should have a chemical hygiene officer designated. If you do not, that is a problem, but not to worry. Under the regulations in OSHA 1910.1945, the superintendent of your school district is actually a chemical hygiene officer, regardless of their experience, background, education, awareness, comfortableness with dealing with responsible chemical management. But we are offering a CHO course to every CHO that's designated for free here at Science Safety. It's valued at over $500, and please share that with them and we'd be happy to set them up. And Dr. Ken, this is one that you should speak to because this is all about you, and this is such a great accomplishment for you and Dr. Love.
Well, like I said, and you only have a small, can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This is only a small snapshot of what we talked about tonight. There's much, much more other revealing statistics that would make me, if I was in a school, very nervous. If I was a teacher or even as an administrator. But again, it's all things that can be addressed. And in these articles, this is only one of a number of articles that we have on the study we did. There are ways to address it, all right? So you can make it safer. These things are fixable. Maybe not 100%, but close to it. Again, you can make it safer, and this will help you do it.
Love it. Love it. There's the contact information for Science Safety. Reach them toll free. You can reach them online. You can send a passenger pigeon and they'll be happy to respond. And in addition to that, all of the references that were discussed tonight in Dr. Ken's presentation are all listed right here. And we're more than happy to provide you with all of that. That's on the reference and resource section underneath that tab at the Science Safety website. And now it's my favorite part of the session where you can ask us really anything. Use the chat box for your safety questions, and Dr. Ken Roy and myself will happily answer those questions. As long as you have the time to stick with us, Dr. Roy.
Yes, I do have a few minutes. And can you also reactivate my video?
I will do my best.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that I can do that.
I think Brian can if you can't. You know. He did it originally.
That would be great if he can do that. Someone just texted me. Oh, there's a question popping in there, and I also have one on my phone. Thank you for an excellent presentation. Could you speak to having 2 exits in the laboratory? Do these exits need to be into a hallway, or may you exit into another lab? Oh, I love that question. But Dr. Roy, I'm going to let you answer that one.
This deals with the NFPA. This is the fire code.
Yes.
And, now, here's the story with the code. The exits are determined to make sure, one thing, that if there is an incident like fire, smoke, whatever, that everyone gets out alive, right? That's the whole basis of this. Forget about the building, the structure, right? That can be replaced, that can be rebuilt, but you can't replace lives. And that's one of the reasons that we have, like we said, with occupancy load, same kind of a deal, right? So you want to make sure that you have appropriate exits. And usually if you have 800 to 900 square feet, you want to make sure that you do have appropriate 2 exits or more, the larger the lab. As to where you're exiting to, the path, the egress, all right? You don't want to go in an exit, or you actually can't even call it an exit, going into the chemical, by the chemical storeroom. All right, no, there's a back doorway in the lab, you go there, that brings you into the prep room and the chemical storeroom, right? You don't want to go there, you're looking for danger, right? So that's something that what you should do is contact your local fire marshal if you have concerns about it. They will come in, they will analyze the way things are, and you must be very honest with them. Are you using active flames? You producing smoke? What kind of ventilation system you have? All these kinds of things enter into it to determine how many exits are appropriate for your particular laboratory. And what you noted is kind of the rule of thumb. You know, they say that, but there are changes that can be made. The same thing is with the occupancy load, right? They say 50 square feet. Well, depending what you're doing in there would dictate, it could be a little bit less, it might be 45, or if it's very dangerous what you're doing, it might even be lower, right? So, you know, it all depends on things. So the best resource there, I would urge you to talk to your local fire marshal.
Great answer. That's almost word for word the one I was going to give. It's one of those things that comes up fairly regularly across this marketplace, I guess, that you and I live in, Dr. Ken.
Yep.
Here's a great question. Oh, it looks, you're back live on the screen now. Look, there you go. Here it is. It says, we do not have a chemical hygiene officer in our school district, but then again, we only have 4 high schools. Is that a real job? Is that a real job or something that the chemistry teacher does at the school level? You know what? You and I are thinking the exact same thing right now.
I tell you, you have no chemical, they're saying they have no chemical hygiene officer?
It says they have 4 high schools, but there is no chemical hygiene officer.
Well, first of all, as you know,
a real job,
the superintendent of schools is the chemical hygiene officer.
Whether they know it or not, yeah, by default.
By default, all right? And usually the chemical hygiene officer, certainly you need to have a certain background and the like, but again, by default, if they don't have one, it's superintendent of school. Now, I can guarantee more than likely that superintendent of schools is unaware of that fact. So possibly the union or the science teacher, department head, science department head, or the STEAM department, whatever, might want to, in writing, contact the superintendent of schools and make him or her aware of that fact. and suggest that possibly they might want to reconsider and have someone that has a specialty in that area, like science, tech, ed, whatever it is, to do that. But the other piece is, given the fact that there are 4 high schools, it would be important to have more than one chemical hygiene officer. I mean, you can only be in one place at one time. And if these are fairly large high schools, you need to have a presence. You also need to have time to do the job. If I have one high school, maybe I might not be assigned an activity duty or supervisory duty, something to that effect. If I'm dealing with 4 high schools, that's another whole ball game. And it should be maybe 2 or 3 periods that they release me to do the work. And the compensation, though he didn't ask about that, it does vary from school district to school district. I know some that would pay $3,000-4,000 extra. They would give them a release time to do it. They give them summer time to do it. Then, of course, you have the other end of the spectrum where it's just do it.
Right. Oh yeah, and we've seen both across the spectrum, as you say. It's a 180-degree variance. Quite honestly, it's inconsistent. Another great question here, Dr. Roy. Oh, this one's for you. Our school minimal hands-on labs with students now since there was an accident about 5 years ago when a student was injured in the district. We do mostly online virtual lab activities with students. Do you see this as a trend across the US, or is this simply a result of the accident in 2017 in my district only? Well, that's a good question.
Well, the first thing that I would want to know was this accident investigated? What was the cause of accident? Did they, in fact, do safety training? Was there a lack of safety training? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see, did the district do their homework or did they not do their homework? That's important to know, all right? Because again, most of these accidents are preventable. And if it was one that was preventable and it was because nobody got trained, well, you know what? Science is hands-on. You need to do it. I certainly wouldn't want a surgeon operating on me that just had virtual training. That's all I got to tell you. All right.
Or a pilot, right?
Or a pilot flying a plane, absolutely. All right, though they do get virtual at first, but then of course they get the hands-on. Yeah, most certainly. I do not see. Now, let me say this. I do find that a number of superintendents, because of the problems with financial issues in school districts over the last 5 years or more, some superintendents are now opting to do YouTube kinds of virtual training for their students, and they're in regular classrooms. They have no hands-on. This is a cardinal sin as far as I'm concerned. All right, science, tech, and engineering, hands-on. You do it so you remember it. And oh, by the way, when you graduate, it doesn't die, because when you go into a workplace, you need to know those safety things, no matter what you're doing in a workplace. So I think what I would do if I was in that school district, I would want to see the accident report, which they are required to have. All right, you need to access it. You might need help with your union to get it and look through it and see how it could have been prevented, and then go forward and suggest or promote or whatever the fact that science and tech and engineering and these other hands-on disciplines are not like mathematics. They're not like language arts. They're not like world language. It's a do thing. It's a do thing. All right. And you have to have the experience of using equipment, materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really important. And as far as I'm concerned, cardinal sin, shame on that school district.
I agree. And I'll speak to the online virtual aspect just because it came from my recent background. Yes, there was a shift towards virtual during the pandemic with school closures, and a lot of science departments would film their actual labs and stream them out to students, sometimes synchronously, sometimes asynchronously. But the movement back towards that hands-on aspect, and there's a big push right now across STEM education for a hands-on or a design outcome-based, inquiry-based environment that's very difficult to accomplish virtually. It's almost impossible if you really get down to it. And we have seen that there has been a ton, and I mean a ton of real efforts made to make those activities blended, that blended environment where it's sometimes virtual, sometimes in class. There is a lot of research being conducted that really demonstrates that hands-on is really the way to go. And that's why having safety at the forefront is so critically important, to make sure they understand that. Because let's face it, we're harnessing that innate curiosity of our students and helping them along their trajectory forward into becoming successful post-secondary students and innovators of tomorrow, but responsible citizens with a solid understanding of safety, because it's everywhere. It's not just in schools. It's not just in the workplace. It's truly everywhere. We wear seatbelts for a reason. We follow traffic laws for a reason. We buy food that is approved for us to eat, that's safe or safer. All of this stuff, for sure. I got off on a little tangent there, Dr. Ken. Sorry about that.
Let me just add a quick sidebar also. One thing that I don't believe was brought up, what about assigning activities for the home front, right? That's something else you have to be very careful of. You want to make sure that you have that acknowledgement form signed. You want to make sure that the parents sign it. You want to make sure that there is training, and you never send home hazardous material to be used in the home or wherever the student is going to be doing this. Because even though they're at home and you're in school, you legally are responsible because you assigned it. And if you have not taken the proper precautions to train them ahead of time, you're it if somebody gets hurt.
Dr. Ken, this is the last question that's come in, and I've read it twice and I love it. I've been teaching for 7 years. I watched a video about OSHA compliance and answered 5 questions when I was first hired, and nothing since then. So teaching for 7 years, watched a video and answered 5 questions. What or who do you recommend for high school science teachers to take science safety training from?
Gee, that's a hard one.
That's a real difficult question. Yeah, that's a real challenge, but I'm thinking of 2 words. Are you thinking of 2 words?
I'm thinking of 3 letters.
I'm thinking of science safety would be the appropriate answer, because
Don't forget to incorporate them.
yes, Science Safety Incorporated.
Those are my 3 letters.
I love it, SSI. Well, Dr. Ken, thank you so much. And on behalf of everyone in attendance tonight, I just want to reiterate that truly you're an inspiration to me and to everyone here. And you're a verified example of educational excellence. And it has been my honor to work with you tonight and to continue to make schools safer. Dr. Ken Roy, thank you so much. And if you have any final words for us, we're all ears.
All I can tell you is be safer in what you do, and don't be afraid to speak up and put it in writing if things aren't the way they should be. Because remember, ultimately, it may fall on you in your lab because you're the one that's in charge of safety, not the administration. And that's something that's very hard for some administrators to deal with, but it's very critical that you cover your butt.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful way to end this session. Thank everyone for staying late, but this has been exceptionally beneficial. And on behalf of everyone at Science Safety, I'm James Palsick. Have a great night. Thanks, Dr. Roy.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. Not sure if you can hear me, but that was a wonderful session. Thank you again.
Yeah, that was great, James. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
All right. I'll stop the recording now.
Okay. Bye-bye.